Get out of my barn.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to Hans Wargaming. I'm doing another crafting video today. So I recently built this set of small stone cottages with thatched roofs, and I was pretty happy with it. I want to expand on this little village set. I've always really been into real-time strategy games like Age of Empires back in the day. I played a lot of StarCraft, Warcraft. There are some great modern ones as well, but I don't play them nearly as much as I used to. But in my mind, I thought it could be fun to kind of like follow the building progression that you would in a game like that when building this town out. So I thought this town definitely needed some sort of like storehouse or barn, and that's what I'm going to be building in this video. I got my townhouse in the back here because I always like to have that in mind. Kind of trying to bridge the gap between this type of village and a larger town. And then also, I bought a bunch of these tabletop scenic sets a while ago. Haven't had time to put them together yet, but I do want to have like a modern day set at some point. So I would kind of like to have barns that go along with something like this as well. So yeah, just keeping that in mind, I spent the last like 2 evenings constructing some basic cardboard outlines just to get my dimensions right. Because for this set, I want to make sure that it goes well with a 28mm scale. And same for everything that I add to this set. I want to make sure that it looks good with a 28mm scale. Here's my test model. With barns, you know, they come in various sizes, so it's not that hard to match it. This was the first one that I built. I did a poll asking you guys which roof style you liked better, and pretty much almost unanimously you guys liked this style roof better. Which, yeah, I can't argue with the fact that this definitely reads a lot more like a barn. This, to me, would be like a larger barn for like a wargaming setting. So I debated for a little while on whether or not I thought that this was too big, because it is a pretty big building. I'm just really trying to be aware of like the scale of the thing, how it's going to look on the board, how it's going to look with this set in particular. And I decided to make a slightly smaller version of this. And this is what I came up with. For this one as well, I did 2 different versions of the roof. As some people pointed out in the comments, these types of roofs are a little bit more modern. Historically, they didn't start showing up until like the 1800s, late 1800s. I didn't really know much about it before this, but I have been doing a little bit of research. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more about it later in the video. But yeah, regardless of that, I think that the A-frame fits this set a little better. So I'm going to do this one with the A-frame. This is not exactly what it's going to look like. It's just a general guideline for me to follow. And then I think I might do a second one, slightly larger. And that one is going to have the nice gambrel, more traditional looking barn style roof. So yeah, hopefully that pleases everybody. Another thing, I'm going to probably do a thatched roof for this one, and then I'm going to do like a more modern, probably steel, maybe shingles, so it goes a little bit better with like this type of setting. We'll see, I haven't decided on that yet. I'm really leaning towards doing a steel roof for this one because I think it would just look a lot better. We will see how it goes. Let the construction begin. First, I cut out some hardboard bases. Sometimes I'll use a power saw for this depending on the weather, but the weather wasn't really that great that day, and I only needed to make a few straight cuts, so I just used a box cutter. Like with the stone cottages, I'm going to use thin cardboard for the backing. This time I tried pre-sanding the cardboard, just to take off that smooth printed surface and make it a little bit easier to glue things to it. I cut out some sections to wrap around the perimeter of the buildings. I was following my stone cottages process here, and this process didn't quite go exactly the same way. So yeah, I will be tearing a lot of this back off. Yeah, if I had thought this through a little bit more, I probably would have only put the cardboard in under the sections where I knew that I was going to be doing some stonework. But you know how it goes. I hot glued them in place, then I went in with some wood glue. And I made this door template to mark off where I wanted my doors. Smaller doors and then larger barn doors. Like with most of my other builds, I'm going to be using pre-textured dowels for this. So this is my current process for texturing these dowels. I'm just using my coarse rasp here. I'll do about like a foot at a time and then move on to the next section. And then use a paper towel or like a spare rag to get all the straggly bits off. And just make sure you don't get a splinter. You can buy these at the hardware store. I do cut them myself, which is significantly cheaper. Then I just use a hobby saw to make the cuts. Yeah, pretty much every piece of dowel wood that you see on these has been pre-measured and cut like this. So I decided to start off with the smaller barn. This is the frame for the barn door on the far side. This one's going to have a lot of stonework, and then the other one is going to be entirely made of wood. I like to get a few stones started at the bottom using some hot glue, then get the corner post in place, and then I'll use wood glue for the rest of it, just picking out and puzzling some stones together. I like to let each side dry for at least a half an hour. That gives the wood glue enough time to set and it won't start oozing out. Yeah, I like to work with gravity and not against it. If you want to see exactly how I made these, check out my stone cottages build. It's the tumble technique. For the other barn, I'm going to be using some bricks. Not a lot, just a few, going around this section here. Yeah, I did 5 layers of those. Yeah, my plan for this section was to make it a little bit more open at the top, kind of like an open stable. I could put like a horse or a cattle in there or something like that. Here I'm squeezing some stones in above the door, and when I say squeezing, I mean loosely fitting them in there because you don't really want to apply any tension. They just want to be a little snug, is what I'm trying to say. And here I'm working out the frame for the next wall, trying to decide which sections of the cardboard to cut off, and then again just gluing everything in place. I like to use hot glue or super glue if I want the bond to be pretty much instant, and then wood glue for everything else. For my standard doorways, I like to use a stone for the footer. For the barn doors, I opted to not even add a footer. Instead, I just beveled the hardboard a bit. Building like this is a very fiddly process, but it is doable. Once the frame is dry, I'll flip it so that wall's facing up, and then I just add my stonework, and that's pretty much the process for all of these walls. For this wall, I did stones on the bottom and wooden planks on the top. I don't pre-cut them. I think it's faster to just glue them all on there and then cut them off. I did have to raise the frame up a little bit higher on this one. Back to the other barn. It was about this point that I realized that I probably shouldn't have wrapped this thing with cardboard since I wasn't really going to be doing any stone work. But yeah, still pretty much the same process with this barn. Just building out the frame and then applying a bunch of stir sticks. Going all the way from the top to the bottom though with this one. I decided to do an open archway for this section. Older barns tend to be built in stages over the years. You'll see sections that were added or taken away over time, and that's mainly why I varied the stonework here and didn't run it all the way up to the top on every single wall. For example, this section is the only spot on this barn where I extended the wooden planks all the way down to the ground. I was just thinking maybe this section was added on a little later, or maybe the builders ran out of stones. On the other barn, I had given up on the cardboard exterior and just removed the entire thing and mounted the rest of the frame on top of the base. I made sure each section of wall had at least 3 horizontal beams on the frame, just to give the exterior planks 3 points of contact. Alright, so at this point the bottom half of this one is pretty much done. Off camera I did do some weathering on this exterior wood. I'm going to show you how I did that with the other barn. The bottom half is almost done. I have to do this section yet, and that's what I'm going to be focusing on next, but I wanted to show you how I weathered this. I've always liked the way this style of barn looks. These vertical planks will often start to come loose and they'll just start bowing out, and then they'll all start rotting on the bottom side here, and that's kind of the effect that I wanted to go for with this barn. So yeah, I just take a pliers and I just start ripping these apart. If you get it right, you can kind of peel some of the stir stick off, and that always gives it a nice look. It's a little tricky with this one because I don't really have anything to brace it against. I can kind of do this, but I don't want to put too much pressure on this because I'm afraid I'm going to like smash the whole thing. So it can be like a tricky process. And yeah, what I did with the other one was I used my rasp and I just kind of went along that bottom edge. Maybe better to pull. That's going to add some gnarliness, and you just want to kind of bring that up on some of the beams, and that really adds to the effect on the bottom here. Yeah, if one comes off like that, perfectly fine. It's just going to add to the effect because I'm going to do that anyway, as long as it isn't too many of them. But I do want to take a few of these out so there's holes here and there. I have a 36 sanding block that I go over with as well. That's going to kind of help to give it a little bit more texture. Then I like to go in with a knife. Cutting some of these planks into like 2 or 3 sections can really help get that look. You can take a little bit off of some of the edges After I've cut some of them, I can go back in with the pliers and just peel sections off. Make sure that they're all flush with this bottom so the thing sits flat. I've found it pretty effective to sit it upside down because then you can rasp it like this. Yeah, that works pretty well. If you've done any brickwork, just be careful with the rasp because the rasp will ruin that brickwork pretty quick if you get too close to it. I tell you what, this is kicking up a lot of dust. Thank Christ I have my quad filter fan nearby. I thought this section would be good as a pen. I haven't decided yet if a portion of that's going to extend into the barn or not, but that's why I made such a wide archway on the inside. For the floors, I just applied some wood glue and then sprinkled some fine sand on top of that. One thing I did have a bit of an issue with, the previous layer of glue that I put on that hardboard initially ended up causing the hardboard to warp a little bit. So I would avoid covering the entire thing with wood glue until you have the frame built out. For the stonework, I used the same recipe that I did for the cottages, starting out with the dark gray base coat. Of course, I mixed some glue in with that. Then a light gray dry brushing. Same thing on the bricks. And then for the stone, I go in with burnt umber, white, and tanned flesh. Just trying to use up some of that old paint. And then I go in with each color and just pick out a few stones here and there. And then I'll also wet blend those colors in a few spots. I think it gives it a nice effect. For the brickwork, I did something a lot simpler. I just picked out a few bricks and painted them brown, 2 tones of brown. Next, I added some grout. I'll face the wall section that I'm working on upward, again letting gravity do the work. Fill in the cracks with some grout, then I'll tilt it down a little bit and brush off the excess. I always like to say be sure you wear a respirator and have good ventilation when you do this. This stuff does tend to go airborne and you don't want to breathe it in. Once I'm happy with that, I'll give it a little spritz of water. That kind of locks everything in place and keeps it from moving around once I use my spray bottle. The spray bottle is more to give everything a good soak. And at this point, if there's any spots that I think could use some more grout, I'll do that. And while the grout is not set at this point, you can move the wall and it will stay in place. So yeah, just repeat that process, go to the next wall and do the same thing. Same thing with the brickwork. I like to give that at least a couple hours to dry, preferably a day. And then I'll go in with some watered down PVA glue or wood glue, and I'll just flood the area with that. Make sure all of the grout soaks that up, and that's going to help to really lock it all in place. For the wood, I like to cover everything with a really dark brown wash. Just water and glue and then your choice of pigment. It really doesn't matter that much what you use as long as you don't use too much of it. Just test it out on a piece of wood to make sure it's transparent enough. For this part, I did have to be a little careful, just making sure that that wash didn't run onto the bricks or the stone. Next, I mixed up some stucco. This is to cover the inner walls. For this, I just used wood glue, water, and grout with some paint. For this one, I went with more of a light umber tint. If you do this, you want to keep the mixture a little soupy. Otherwise, the grout will start to set, and I'll spread that out on any of the sections where the cardboard is still visible. For this, I did do one wall at a time, and I gave each wall about 10 minutes to dry before I flipped it. And this is what that looks like once it dries. I think it gives it a nice muddy effect. To finish off the wood, I used beige and khaki paint, just dry brushing them on there. I like to start with the khaki and then go in with the beige. For my buildings, I like to make removable roofs. To do that, I'll make an inner lip that sits on the inside of the top of the frame. I make that pretty tight so tension fits into place. And then later on, if it needs it, I'll bevel those edges so it easily sockets together. I decided that this was going to have to be a multi-part video, so I'm not going to show the full gambrel roof build in this video, but that will be coming up. For the A-frame, it's pretty much the same process I used for my stone cottages. I'll cut out some templates for the roof ends. I glue them onto the ends of that inner lip, and then I glue dowels and stir sticks on top of that. That's the simple version of it. There are some fairly complex cuts here that are kind of hard to describe. I made 2 separate pieces for this roof. Here's how the smaller one looks on the underside. Once I get the sides constructed, I glue a few dowels onto the inside to span that length. Then I glue some stir sticks on top of the dowels, glue some cardboard on top of that, and paint it black. And once that's done, it looks like this. So yeah, I'm going to do a thatched roof for this one. I use manila rope for this. First I'll unwind the rope to separate the smaller strands. Then I bunch those strands together and I'll cut them off in 1-inch clumps. Then to adhere them, I mix up a thick wash, 1 part glue, 1 part water, and then some pigment of your choice. It's like a brownish wash that's also going to seal everything together. And then I have a smaller container of just straight glue. So I'll take one of those clumps, I'll dunk it into the wash, fully soak it, squeeze it to wring it out a bit. Then I'll dunk it in the glue. You want a generous amount of glue for this. Apply it to the roof and fan it out. So I'll do this in a couple passes. Each pass layers over top of the previous one, much like a real thatched roof. And it's gonna look something like this. We will clean it up more once it dries. Same thing for the larger roof, just applying 1 layer at a time. Since I have an exposed ridge beam on this roof, I made the top layer a little shorter because that one won't have anything overlapping it. Then I'll set that aside to dry, making sure that there's not too much dripping off the bottom, which if you've squeezed the excess water out, there shouldn't be too much of. Before this fully dried, I assembled everything, and I stuck a piece of parchment paper between the 2 roofs. That was mainly to make sure that they socketed together well once they were dry. That did work pretty well, as you can see. Then it was time to give the roofs a haircut. You need a pretty beefy set of shears for this, and a comb really helps. I go over the thing a few times and try and cut all the stragglers off. Then I'll pipe some more of that glue mixture onto the roofs again to give it one last seal. I'll also use that mixture for the floor to blend everything together. Getting close to done. Time to make some doors. In my previous builds, the doors were stationary. I didn't use working hinges for them or anything like that. It just kind of felt like it would be a little bit too fiddly if I tried to do that. I did find some tiny dollhouse hinges. I don't think I'm going to use them for this one, but maybe for the other one. For this one, I want to do sliding doors. Yeah, so I was thinking about how to do that exactly, and this is what I came up with. I found some of these at Walmart. These are toggle clasps. They're for like necklaces. You get 2 different pieces with these. That's what they look like. For the sliding door, I'm just going to be using these. It's just a larger O-ring connected to a smaller O-ring. And so I have a bunch of cheap airbrush hardware that I know I'm never going to use. And that includes a few of these extra needles. Yeah, I wanted something that wouldn't bow too much because I want to be able to do a full-size door that slides all the way over. This was about the right size and I know I'm never going to use it. So yeah, I decided to try using this. They fit together pretty well. There's a little bit of wiggle room there, so that's perfect. And I'm going to use 3 of these, I think, for the door, maybe 4. Yeah, that's what the inner workings are going to look like. So now I just need to build a frame for it. And build a frame I did, mainly out of popsicle sticks, starting with 4 of the O-rings, making sure that they were all lined up. Then I just built the rest of the door out on top of that, with crisscrossing layers of wood. For the trim work, I just looked at some reference pictures online. To attach the rod, I cut out 2 small end pieces and drilled a hole partially through them. I plugged those into each side and carefully glued it on there, making sure that the door was going to slide where I wanted it to be. You'll notice I also had to cut a tiny little notch into the left side there to get it to sit at the right spot. I added some stir sticks to tie the 2 ends together and give the whole thing a little bit more support. I did add a few more pieces later on. For the other doors, I did in fact decide to use those hinges. I decided to mount them on the outside just because they're so small. To do this, I held them in place, marked each hole with a pencil, and then pre-drilled some small holes. Next, I superglued them into place very carefully, trying to avoid getting superglue into the center part. And then I carefully put each nail in. God, these things are so small. These things are so damn small, and I can tell you I'm not going to be doing this again. It was a very delicate process. If you can find them, you can get these hinges in other colors. These were the only ones available at my local Hobby Lobby. I wish I could have found some black hinges, but I could only find them online and they're just way too expensive to justify buying. Both sets of doors ended up being about 1/4 of an inch thick. Since these doors are hinged, I did have to remove a section of wood on the back so they would open and close properly. So I decided to paint the hinges black, and yeah, that works as long as you don't open or close the door. But as soon as you open that door up, the hinge will just kind of scrape that paint away. So not a great solution. And here is the final product. I added a fixed door to this side and one on the other side, right here. They're just made out of stir sticks, and I used a little mini stick for the handle. Pretty happy with how this came out for the most part. I added some little sections up here to give this slider a little bit more support, but it does work pretty well. I didn't intend for this, but this stone here kind of acts as a stopper and just kind of keeps it in place. And then you just lift it up over that and slide it over, and yeah. There you go. So I think for the other barn, when I finish that, I think I'm going to stick with either fixed doors or sliders. I'm not going to use any more hinges. The hinges here, I think they look just fine as long as I don't open it up. Maybe I'll just take that paint off and stick with the bronze hinges. I'm really not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue. I went a little too dark with the thatch, so what I did was I just dry brushed some yellow ochre over top of that. I think that brought the overall color close enough to the other roofs. Here's what the interior looks like. I was considering building a loft for this barn, but I decided not to just because I wanted to be able to reach in there. So it's not really that functional as a fortification. You could say it's more of like decoration, just for like narrative storytelling, which I'm okay with. Like I said, I'm gonna do another video, finish the other barn, and I have a few other ideas that kind of tie into this as well. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this build. Let me know what you think. Thanks to my patrons for the support. If you want to help support this channel, consider becoming a Patreon member. I also have affiliate links down below if you want to check those out. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you later.